Okay, this is Mike Weiner. We are recording our second mid-course session. It's the second live review session, part of the FP&A exam review. For this session, I want to jump forward a little bit and go over the materials that are primarily in chapter 14 of the second part. These are the Excel functions, and I prefer to review those live. So let's go ahead. Just real fast. You are while we're enrolled in the course, it's easiest to reach me through um, through Canvas. But after the course ends, when you no longer have access, if you need to, you can reach me either at my email address or through LinkedIn. And these are shown here on the screen. All right, and so basically I've assembled the functions that I'd like to review into a workbook so we can kind of proceed through the tabs. I may skip over some of these, but generally these are the functions that the Excel functions. The Excel portion of the course is very appropriate and important to an FP&A professional. Excel by default is the choice of tool for FP&A. As you're going through the materials, of course, they also talk about other FP&A tools such as databases and now, of course, business intelligence tools, which do a better job of visually displaying data. But the largest focus of the course when you get to the tools section is on spreadsheets. I use Microsoft Excel, the 2016 version, and I'll actually show you in a bit some of the new functions that were added between 2013 and 16. But there's not that much that was added to 2016. If you have 2013, almost all of this will apply. Okay, so this slide is actually old from an earlier chapter. This is from chapter 6, and actually I believe I've got this in the presentation, but this is the explanation or demonstration of how you calculate duration. And I think this is in the recorded material, so you should have this already. But basically, you take cash flows from an investment, and then you discount those to a present value. In this case, we use 10%. And so these are the periods, these are the cash flows you see in zero. We've got the investment followed by the expected cash flows, and then you discount those to their present values. Then you look at the payback period first in whole terms to get the payback. So if we take these first, let's see, seven cells, we get a payback that doesn't quite get us there. We're still missing $1.30, 1.32 or $1.32 in payback. And so the way you account for that fraction is by taking 1.32 of this 467 or 0.28. So basically we have, oops, that's a circle is a graphic. So you basically have, let's see, 8 periods plus 0.28 of a ninth period to give us 8.28 periods. So in simple terms, the sort of simple payback is here. We get our simple, if you look at a traditional, sort of simple payback model, we get our money back in 6 periods. Under duration math, we get it back in 8.28 periods. Okay, so that's that slide. Okay, these tables, I think none of these are going to be important for us. These I just did at one point because there was a live class conversation. Let's go here. Okay, so there's nothing important here. This formula inconsistency, this is a demonstration of one of the actually, you know what, let me see if I can increase the size of this a little bit. Is that working on your screen? Yeah, it looks like it is, just so you can see a little better. there is a error function, error display function built into Excel, and it's important to at least look at what it tells you. You may not decide to deal with it, but you should at least look. If Excel sees a formula, a cell entry that is, it thinks may be a problem, it will indicate that to you by putting a little green triangle in the left corner of that cell. So you see here I've got a green in my cell E6. I've got a green triangle in the left corner. That indicates there is an error, or maybe. When I click on that, you get a little drop-down box next to it, and it's got a error warning. Actually, when you hover, you see it's giving you the message. The formula in this cell differs from the formulas in this area of the spreadsheet. You also get a little drop-down box where you can kind of deal with this. So it may be that it's intentional, so we're just going to ignore it. Or we may want to go ahead and have it edit to us. Obviously, we can do it ourselves, but you know this would bring you up to the formula bar to edit. This will give you some help on the error. This one actually says, okay, replace this formula with this formula that's in the cell above. Now, why are we getting this? In this particular case, we're getting the message because the rest of these formulas are summing rows that they're on. But in this one, whoops, this one actually, I have a different formula. I'm saying B minus C. So it's saying it's proposing that you've probably made an error. In fact, in this case, I likely have. It looks at others. There's other types of errors, but you always want to at least address these, at least look at them. And if it's intentional, at least know that. Okay. This is my own. This is not part of the course, but I like to share it with the class because not that you have to use mine, but there's a purpose to this. In fact, I was this morning before starting this recording, I was corresponding with a one of our clients, and it was convenient because the workbook, the Excel book that I provided them, uses this methodology, this method. So it was very easy for me to say, hey, just go look at the teal cells and check those links and make sure you're happy with them. So what I do is I've found that it makes workbooks more efficient. It helps me work more easily with Excel workbooks. If I code cells, if they're all just black, sometimes you actually have to go click on them all to see what they do. So I like to kind of code them. Sometimes for presentation purposes, you have to take those colors out later because it looks a little bit like a circus. But I like to code them if they're working documents. It helps me be more efficient. And over the course of my career, this is kind of the method that I've developed. If something is just a text entry or a local formula, I'll leave it alone. I'll leave it black. If it's a cell that I expect to routinely expect input to particularly values, I'll code it blue. If it's an inconsistent formula or something that I want to be careful to change, or at least to be, to draw my attention to later for possible change, I'll code it red. If it's what I call an internal link, a link to other worksheets within the workbook, I'll code it brown. If it's external links to other worksheets located in other workbook files, I'll code it green. And if it's something that I'm concerned I need to validate or fix and I want to mark it, I'll generally just highlight it with a yellow. You can do whatever you want, but it's convenient when you do these. It makes you much faster, and other people faster for them to work with your cells. It also reduces the chance that they might override cells or provide input where you're not looking for it. That kind of leads us into our next conversation, which is cell protection. Excel also has the capability for you to prevent users from destroying formulas and whatnot that you don't want them to touch. So let me just scroll this again. Okay, so again, my terminology that I use, if I've coded it blue, it's because that's where I would like the input. So in this particular case, clearly this is the cell that's to get input, and this next one is a formula. If you right click, so I already have protection on. So what will happen here is even if I tried, I'm going to type the number 5. If I tried to change it, it won't let me. The seller chart you're trying to change is on a protected sheet. To make a change, unprotect the sheet. Okay, so I've already protected it. This one, this cell, I have not protected. So if I want to change it to 11, it will let me do that. Now, installing protection is kind of well, at least cell protection, is a two-step process. The first is to enable the protection. I'm sorry, it is to set the property of whether the cell is protected or not. And then the second is to enable protection for the spreadsheet. What am I talking about? So if you go to the review tab here, there are two uh, buttons on the ribbon, the review ribbon, that control protection. The first one is what controls the sheet. If I click unprotect, now I've eliminated protection, and even though these cells are individually have a property of being protected, they're not protected because I've unprotected the sheet. So if I were to type here 5, it's going to take the 5. Even though I have, let's see if you do format cells, and then you look at protection. Even though this cell is locked, that lock isn't working because the sheet isn't protected. Okay, so let me undo that entry. So back to 2. Now I can protect it. When I go to protect it, that will restore the protection, but it gives you a dialog box. First, you can put in a password. If you really don't want anyone to be able to get at unprotecting this sheet, then you can put a password on it. There is no way to recover this password. So keep that in mind. Microsoft won't do it for you. If you put a password in and forget it, you have permanently protected it. You would basically have to rebuild the sheet if you later on want to remove that protect password and don't remember. Okay, then there's some other options, and these are interesting. You can you can customize what's actually protected. Normally, I just do the two that are pre-selected. Basically, it allows you to select locked cells. If you take this off, then they can't even click on cells that are locked. If you leave it on, they can click it. This one is selected unlocked. Okay, so I'm not going to password protect it. Well, if I did, let me type in T as test, T-E-S-T. And if I click this, it will make you confirm it. So at least you won't make that kind of mistake. Now I'll take it off. Okay, so now I'll put the password back on. When I do that, you'll see this changes to unprotect sheet. So the physical labeling of this button tells you whether you're protected or unprotected. It's amazing to me with a nearly 30-year-old program like Excel and all of the high-powered resources that Microsoft has on the development of this product, that they still have bugs and errors that are absurd. This one is one of my favorites. Notice this one here, when I protected it, it toggles between protected and unprotected. That's not the case with Protect Workbook. When you click the one next to it, it doesn't work the same way, and it should. If I protect the workbook, and I'll go ahead and protect it, instead of now changing to say unprotect workbook like this one did, instead, let me click away from it so that we can. Basically what it does is it toggles the shade of it. So the only way you know it's protected is that the shade has changed. It's crazy that these two right next to each other don't work the same way, but they don't. This one toggles between being labeled protect and unprotect. This one toggles between shaded and not being shaded. Protect workbook is a little bit different. Let me take it off and put it back on so you can follow that. What that does is it gives you the ability to protect the workbook. Again, you can password if you want. What that's useful for is maybe you have worksheets that you don't want the user to be able to see. Well, you could hide that worksheet and then protect the workbook, and that way they can't get at it. They can't change the structure. Data validation. Data validation is another highly useful element that you can use to control inputs and the user provides. So what data validation does, and to be honest, I've only started using it in the last year or two, and it was like, where were you all my life? I never realized. It is located under the data tab. Yeah, it's over here, data validation. And what data validation does is allow you to set parameters on what can be provided to a cell. So let's say I want people to put in the number of 4. I don't want them to be able to type FOUR because I want to use that number 4 in a formula someplace. So I need to limit what they can do there. You use data validation to do that. So I've already installed data validation on this cell. And you see I've got a message on it, and you see that when when I click on it, it says buildings, input an integer between 0 and 10. And if I fail to do that and try and type 4, there's actually an error message that says this is not an integer, retry. Okay, so that's what data validation is. How do you do that? The way you do that is with data validation. So here's the data validation for that box. First is a settings tab. And here you can select what kind of validation you want to put on it. In this case, I've said make it a whole number. I've also said if let's say you're assigning this data validation to a range instead of a single cell, you can do that. You can say, okay, yeah, but ignore blanks. If it's a blank cell, don't put data validation on. In this case, I've also put further parameters on the whole number, that it be between 0 and 10. And that's how I've done that. If I made this 5, instead of 10 and click OK. And now I go and try, now it didn't change my message, and I'll explain why in a moment, but if I try and put in 8, it's not going to work. Now, again, my error message is wrong because I didn't change that, but it didn't accept the 8 because it's more than the 5 that I just set as data validation. Let me go back and change the data validation on it, back to my 10. You also can click this button down here, apply these changes to all other cells within the same setting, and that will simultaneously change all of the cells on the worksheet that have this same data validation. Okay, so you saw a little bit about the messages. There are two other tabs in this dialog window. The first one is input message. This is where I'm defining, do I want to show it yes or no? Do I want to give it a title? That's what's in bold. Do I want to put an input message? If I change this to don't do that, it changes to don't do that when I click on it. Okay, of course, that's silly. I was just trying to, let's see if hopefully I can undo that because I can't remember what I had there, but there we go. Okay, good. All right, then the second dialog box is the error alert. And this is where you tell it what to do if there's an error. And so let me, yeah, I can't demonstrate that simultaneously. But in this case, I've said stop. In other words, don't let the input proceed. Give it a title of non-integer and say this is not an integer. You have other options. You could just do a warning, or you could just provide information. All of these, could be used. So maybe you want to allow the error. You just want to say, hey, this is a big number. Are you sure? Well, you could do that. You could put information and say, are you sure? Okay, so that's what that is. In the next box, I'm demonstrating another type of data validation. Let's look at this data validation. Okay, so this data validation, instead of doing a whole number like I did in the last one, I've selected list. And then I've said use the list that's in cells H3 to H8 and create an in-cell dropdown, and again, skip blanks. By doing that, you create a dropdown where the only entries that the user can provide are the ones that you've preset. And of course, you see these match perfectly to my range H3 to H8. If I change this to chartreuse, now I've got chartreuse as a color. Okay, so that's useful. I use this a lot where I want the user, let's say I'm going to filter. Let's say I've got a list of tasks that need to be performed and who's responsible. And I don't want someone to type in James and somebody else to type in Jim when it's the same person. I'll create a list and make it a drop down so they can only pick James. Okay, now let's talk about 3D formulas. All right, so I've got a block here that I've done these can you see the colors? Yeah, you should be able to. These tabs that I've done. There's a very useful function in capability of Excel where you can do formulas not just on a worksheet or on a worksheet linking to another worksheet, but actually as a slice through multiple worksheets. So, and that can be very useful if you are trying to perform math on some kind of a report that's similar for different entities, for example. So let's say we're a retailer and we've got, it doesn't matter, we're a sales organization, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 districts: East, Central, Northeast, South, and West. And I want to create a roll-up of those, of the results. So in each of these divisions, and look, I've not been, why is this, I protected this? All right, well, I guess it's not critical. But anyway, so I've got a sales figure. And now, in order to do what I'm talking about, the worksheets that we are going to work with have to have the exact same structure because we're going to do a three-dimensional sum. So in this case, what I want to sum is the sales figure that is in cell B1 on each one of these. What we're about to do won't work if that sales figure is in B5 on some of them and B3 on another and B1. This only works if they're clones, if they're identical. What you see is, actually, of course, I've already entered the formula. So you'll see what it does is it shows first tab through last tab, and then the single cell that it's referring to. So I could set something up similarly by manually pointing to them, equal, and then point to the first one, this, plus, and then point to the second one, et cetera. And set up and of course this would be a long, it'd be a long formula separately put. This one's a lot more efficient. I've just done east to west. Okay, so let me see if I remember how we do this. The way you set this up is by using the shift key. You start typing equals sum, whoops, that wasn't equals, equals sum, left parenthesis to start the formula. Then you click on the first tab so that you get it indicated here, and the cell that you want to be the start of the three-dimensional range. Then, and you won't be able to see this, but I'm now depressing, holding down the shift key while you click on the last tab. Okay, so you see what it's done to the formula there? It said east to west, and it's just said cell B1. Now I can just click my right parenthesis, which, by the way, I needed to hold, just because of the keyboard, I needed to continue holding the shift key down. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to. And then hit enter. And now I've done that three-dimensional. Now, is this protected? No, it's not. Let's say I make this 1 million. Oh, it is protected. I protected these. Right, this one's not protected. Let's say I make this 1 million. And then you'll see, of course, that my three-dimensional cell has changed, as it does the one that's pointed to it. This one is actually, the formula itself is driven by the sheets that are named. So if I take the central tag and drag it out of the way, I'm going to just move it over to here, you'll see that my formula, my formula has gone down because it still says give me east to west, and I've moved central out of the way. If I take central and drag it back in, and then go back to my formula, you'll see it's back in. All right, so you have to be very careful with this. The main thing is you have to be careful that you've got identical structures. The way this works, it's going to sum whatever's in B1. And you could do count, any function. It's the range that's three-dimensional. Store this the way it was. Okay. All right, so most of these blue tabs are most of these blue tabs are from session 11. That's in part 2. It's domain C, chapter 14. Yeah, this is the lion's share of the. So this is review of what's in the material, but a lot of times what's there, it helps if somebody kind of shows you. So that's why I like to do this live. Okay, so this is an explanation of relative cell references, mixed cell references, and absolute cell references. This is a very powerful function or function, and it's really important that you understand what it does, because you will be a much more efficient programmer if you know what's going on in these. The way you control cell referencing is with the insertion of dollar signs. So here's what's called a relative cell reference. Relative cell reference has no dollar signs. It just has a column, column C, and a row, row 5. That's the default. So if I type in here a formula equals, and I'll just point over here, you'll see the formula is M23. It's relative. If I copy that M23, and I'm going to copy it by just dragging the handle, which is the little square in the bottom right corner of the cell, and I copy that across, because it's a relative cell reference, when I copy it, it automatically changes relative to the position of the new cell versus the old cell. So I had M23. Now this cell references N23, O23, and P23. If I copy this down, because I've copied it down with the relative references, P23, P24, P25, P26, etc. It's very efficient to work this way, but sometimes you don't want that to happen. So you can use either a mixed absolute or full absolute cell reference where you insert dollar signs. If you have a full absolute reference, that's where, so equals, and I'm going to go ahead and point here as P21. Then I'm going to insert the dollar signs, and I'm going to do it first by just typing them in. Okay. Now when I copy this, it won't change because it's been locked down in absolute methods. So these will all say P21. And if I drag them this way, copying, they're all going to say P21. It's completely absolute. Okay. So that's how that works. Let me set up another one real fast, because I want to show you another little trick. Here I have one P27. Instead of typing the dollar signs, you could do something else, which is to be in edit mode, be editing the cell, and hit the F4 key. You can't see this, but I'm hitting the F4 key. When you do that, it will cycle through, first making it a full absolute reference, then making it a relative as to column, and fixed absolute as to row, then the other way around, then completely relative, and back. And you can keep doing that. If you only have a simple formula like this, it doesn't matter. But if you have a long formula that maybe includes numerous cells, it may be faster to use that F. It's the F4 key. It only works if you're in edit mode. So you have to be, in edit mode. And then again, I'm pressing the F4 key. I'll cycle through those. Okay, so let's look at why you might, how you might use these different tools to in programming efficiently. Let's say I've got, now you'll see these are all blue, so these are all entries, and I've got a little mini expense, the expense portion of an income statement for the months of January, April, May, June. Okay, and apparently, all right, so let's see what I've done here. Okay, so here are the numbers again, and I've got a fringe rate here. So I've set up a formula here where I'm saying for fringe, give me C18, so I'm going to click this and I'll show you what give me the fringe rate times the dollars. So I've got 35% fringe, so I've got a 19,000 fringe rate for January. If that's completely relative, those cell references are relative as they are now, and I then try and copy this formula across, in this case I'm dragging the handle, but you could also do Control-C, Control-V, or you could use the copy paste functions up in the menu. You'll see that I don't get the right answer. In this case, because I've copied a relative, it's still doing give me the cell to my left times the cell 3 rows above me. So what we wanted to do is fix this. We don't want this reference to change, even as I copy it across. So I'm going to change the column reference, so that would be here, column B, to $sign, to absolute. Then when I copy it, I've maintained oops, let me get that off. I've maintained the absolute reference to this column B. Let's say I had done this as full absolute. Copy this from here. Now I decide, well, I want to do the same thing for FICA. All right, so I'll copy it here. Again, I want a number multiplied by this number multiplied this number. Problem is, because this was absolute, I'm referencing the wrong cell. If I had made this partial, so I say, a mixed absolute, sorry, not partial, mixed absolute. So let me take off this row number, the $sign on the row number. Now when I copy it, didn't work. Why didn't it work? It didn't work because I forgot to lock in the row on the first reference. Now when I copy it, I'll get the right answer. C18 times B24. And when I copy this across, it's still doing exactly what I want it to do. So this is the best formula. What I've ended up having to do is make it absolute as regarding the row on the on the expense, and make it absolute as regards the column on the multiplier. I can then actually use this because it's the best. I can use it here. That's why I'm saying it's the best. Okay, so that is what goes on with that. So be aware of that and use that to your advantage. You can be a much more efficient program if you do that. Pay special. Okay. Pay special is, I'm going to move along a little faster. This is going to be okay. Pay special. Pay special is another function. You can take a number. So I'm going to copy it. I did Control C, and I can paste it here. That doesn't matter. Paste it here by doing Control V or hitting the paste button, and it will. In this case, I'm actually getting an error because it's the formula that's evaluating to an error. But let's say I just wanted the value to come over, not the formula. What I could do is copy. I'm doing Control C, or you could also hit this copy button, and then come over where I want it and paste special value. Now, there are visual descriptions here, but I find them, I'm just not efficient with them. So I kind of go back to the original dialog box, which I find more efficient, but most of these are represented graphically here. And then I'll say, okay, what I want is the values. And I don't want to perform an operation. I don't want to skip blanks or anything. I just want the value. So that, and I got the value. Maybe instead, I want the format of it. So let's do this. I want this format on this cell. So I would copy, come here, paste. Now here is, let's see, is this one? Yeah, here's that's the formulas and number format. I don't use these. By the time I look at them, it's easier for me to just go ahead and bring up this box, which is the original box, and then this is the legacy, and pick what I want here. In this case, I want the formats. Okay, so now I've got the format. It's the same number under it, but now I've got the format. Okay, so that's what that's about. Really nothing more to say there. Okay, this is ifs, and ifs is a new function. This only works in 2016. It doesn't work in older versions of Excel, and it's useful. Can you live without it? Probably. But let's say you have a nested if function. So we haven't actually talked about if functions yet, but so I've kind of got this in the wrong order. but let's say you have, if the sky is blue, work. If the sky isn't blue, if the sky is rainy, sleep, work or sleep. So you've got conditions within them. You used to have to create the entire, if each if function had to sit within the next if function that it was part of. Now what they've got is ifs, which basically just lets you list the sequence of things to check. So here's my source, and I've got ifs. If source equals 1, give me 1. If source equals 2, give me 2. If source equals 3, give me 3. If source equals 4, give me 4. So if I change this to 2, ifs will change that to 2. What I'm trying to explain is the old way for doing this. I'll copy it. Before this function existed, you would have had to do this. If source equals 1, 1, I have to copy this. Well, set up, so I'm not going to do all of them. Source equals 3. And then I'll, all right, one more time. And then I'll make the last one just the default on the last if statement. And then you got to close all these. Okay. So without ifs, your formula looks like this. With ifs, your formula is a little cleaner. And that's all that does. Only works in 2016. I pulled this worksheet up on a 2013, and this formula evaluates to an error. It doesn't work. If you want to learn more about it, here's the address. Kind of, you can Google it, but it's actually there. There's an address for it. Hey, table. Tables are a way of organizing data, and they can make you very efficient. The primary Microsoft Office database program is Microsoft Access, and it comes typically with most of the versions of Microsoft Office that you can buy. It comes with the subscriptions. It is a true database program, and the interface on it is typically one of you build an input screen that allows you to create data that resides in database tables, and then you run processes on them to generate reports. Excel is more of a three-dimensional visual interface as you're looking at, but they have enhanced its functionality as a database significantly in a bunch of ways, one of which is they expanded the capacity. It used to, I think, only have 65,000 rows. Now it goes down to 104,000. No, that's 1,048,578. So they added a lot more. It also only used to go from A to, I think, IV, something like that. Now it goes out to XFD. So they've added a lot more data capability, storage capability. They've also added things over time like tables. So this is a table. What I've done is these are all, we're all just typed in. And so let me just show you how to build one. I'm going to copy this data, and I'm going to paste special values. So I have the information. Okay, so now it's just been entered. It's just sitting here entered. The way you turn it into a table is to highlight the area. Actually, Excel will recognize it even if you don't highlight it. And then insert table, or you can do Control T, which will also do that. So Control T, and then it says it typically will recognize your data as long as it's in a contiguous range. My table has headers. Yes, in this case it does. Hit OK, and now you've got a table. What it's done is it's automatically banded them according to the the style that you're on. Now you can change that here, and there's a bunch of them. Here are some of them. You can actually create your own. A lot of times, the clients, I will use the colors in their logo to make the tables look like they're customized for their company. Okay. The other thing it automatically does is something that you can do manually, which is to add filters. So here is the filter. You get to the filter by clicking on the little drop-down list. And when you do that, you get sorting options. You also get sort by color, which I can show you in a moment. You get text filters, which lets you sort for certain characteristics. And then it will give you a list of them. So let's say now we've got our data, but I will only want to see Greg, and that's all I got. You know a filter is applied because the drop-down arrow turns to a filter, a funnel actually. That shows you that this list is functioned. The other way you would notice it is you'll see here that the row numbers are no longer continuous. If you click on this and put it back to select all, or what I could have done another way on this and do clear filter. Clear filter, is the other way, or select all. Either way, very useful. So let's say I only want to see people in my company who are in their 20s. Filter, number filters, between 20, 29, and Mary's the only one. Okay, so there's all kinds of stuff you can do with this. The other entries are not gone, they're just hidden. But unlike when you hide rows by yourself, if you do any kind of math on this group, the filtered rows will not affect the math. They're not, it's as if they're not there. Whereas if you just hid the rows yourself manually, which you can do by right click hide, then those hidden numbers, well, possibly not in a table, but those hidden numbers would be picked up. Let's see what happens. Equals count. Here is, say 4 or 5. Oh, it's because of it's a table. It's on funky things. Yeah. I'll do it this way. Equals count. I'll type it in manually. D6, D10. I'm just curious to see. Okay. It was because I was doing count on a text field. Now I'm going to label. See, I hid row 8, but it's still saying I have data of 5. That's what I was trying to describe. Whereas if I copy that same, let's see, it's same formula here. Count. Interesting. It's giving me anyway. Okay. Never mind. All right. So, so that's filters. Another. Oops. I meant to restore this. Another useful thing. Let's say you've got maybe this is instead of being in this table, it's transactions, and going through them, there's a whole bunch that I'm concerned about, and I'm like, wait a minute. Mary's 21, 130 with brown eyes. We don't have anybody 130 with brown eyes. So I color that yellow. Later on, you can go and do a filter by color. Just select the ones that you needed to go back and look at. That's very useful. It even no fill. You can even, maybe you have 2 different categories, so you can use that color for it. And then when you do filter by color, it's going to say which color you want. It can be very useful. Colors. Okay, so that's a table. Kill this. Once you have a table, and right now it looks like I've got filters on this. Let's clear all the filters. so I've cleared all the filters. Here's my data again. You can create slicers. Slicers, I think, came in either 2010 or 2013. It may have been version 2013. And they're kind of useful. They let you build a simple dashboard. I mean, there are much more nowadays with business intelligence tools. There are very fancy dashboards, but this is a simple dashboard, dashboarding device. What I've done is I've created slicers. They are under slicer, insert slicer. And what that does is it lets you, it's kind of like, it's a visual display that lets you apply filters. So if I just click on just show me Greg, it just shows me Greg. If I hold down the control key and also ask, say give me Joe also, it gives me Joe and Greg. If I want to add John, I'm using the control key to control collected, or I could have done shift key, Greg, John, Joe. There's my data. Now, let's say between those, I only want the ones with blue eyes. Okay? Maybe I only want the ones with 4 children. So these are slicers. You can actually do some formatting with slicers. Let's see. Select. That will get rid of the slicer if I click on that. Oh, multi-select. When you click this, I think it gives you the ability. Yeah, while that button is highlighted, it's like holding down the control key. You can apply format. Right click, slicer settings. Here it is. And in here, you can do all kinds of things. Maybe I want this to be, and maybe I want them in descending order, and et cetera, et cetera. So what happened? Why didn't I get my? Oh, I'm sorry. This is not the name for the slicer. This is the name to use in formulas. That's why. There's a caption name. This is where I want it. I don't think that can be blank. Okay, so now it's changed to superstars. So you can create like a simple dashboard type device for executives, users, where they can quickly drill down. Could be very useful if you have a table of sales data and you want them to be able to drill down by region or something like that. All right. If you want, you can remove the filter by clicking on clear filter. How do you insert a filter? The way you insert, I'll go back to the table. You position in the table, insert slicer, and it'll say which ones do you want. It looks at your table and says, okay, here are the fields I recognize. I want a slicer on eyes, and there's my slicer. And I can move that to other workbooks, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, other worksheets. Okay, those are slicers. Arrays. Oh, I don't like this one because I'm not comfortable with it. So I'm going to have to remember how to do it. But arrays are very powerful, and I have used them, and they're very powerful. But typically, frankly, I never remember how you put them in. So I do something which I might as well make the comment at this time. You don't have to remember how to use any of these. Any of these functions in Excel. All you have to remember is that they exist, and then you go Google them. There is a conditional formatting to install. We're going to do conditional formatting later. There's a conditional formatting to automatically shade rows that works automatically. Even if you add rows, it'll adjust the shading. To do that, you need a formula. I never remember that formula, so what I do is I run out to the internet. I type in Excel shade every other row, and it comes up. I copy the formula and I paste it in. Same thing with something else that I do often. Oh, you get a list of you get a full name, first name, a list of people, and it's first name, last name in the list, and you only want the last name. Well, there's a formula that will give you just the last name from a list of full names. I never remember that, and so I just go and I grab it off the internet. Okay, so here I left myself instructions here. So the first thing you do is let's see, so here is an array function. Let's look at the single cell first, that's easier. Um, Here is an array function. So what it's doing is it's summing K7 through K9 times L7 through L9. So what it's doing is it's summing this times this, plus this times this, plus this times this. If you were to build that function manually, it would have to look like this. Equals this times this plus this times this plus this times this. And you get the same answer. But um, this is a small demonstration. If we had several thousand items in our list, it wouldn't be practical to build it this way. With an array function, you don't have to. So now let's see if I can recreate it. So select the destination range, create the formula. And so my formula is going to be equals sum this times this. I think that's how you do it. And then I'm going to do Control, Shift, Enter. Voila. That's how you do it. So it's these three steps. It's very powerful. If we had several thousand rows here and we needed, in this particular answer, this is a good way you could get a weighted average, right? Um, anyway, that's how you do it. There's also an ability to do it in a multi-cell array. This one's a little trickier. So let's see, what is this doing? E7 through E10. I may skip this because I have to go back and look and see. But you can do it in a multi-cell version as well. But you kind of get the idea how you create these. Transpose. Transpose is a way of reorganizing data. So here's my original range. And there is a transpose function. Copy, put it here, right click. I'm going to go to paste special and transpose. And I get what I've done here, okay? But if I change one of these, of course, this doesn't change because it was static. When I pasted it here, I pasted it static, just transposed. What if I want the new range to continue to adjust if my original range adjusts? The way you do that is with the transpose function. So I would take this. Wait, let me look at it because I always transpose C5 through F9. All right, let's try it. Control Shift and didn't get it. Let's see. Because you have to, the entire destination has to be, okay. For sizing, I'm going to do it this way. Special names. So now I've got that set up, and well, hold on a second. Some of these copy, right click, special, expose. And now I've got, all right, now with that range selected, because now I know what range it needs to be, I'll start again. Equals transpose. I think I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to select my array. and then control shift. Oh no, then you have to close this. Control shift there. Okay. Control shift enter was the last piece. So it's a little complicated. There's a lot of steps, and you have to have the eventual transpose range pre-selected. So that means you have to know what size it is. The destination has to be selected. Okay, so what do I do here? First, what's the purpose of this? Let me highlight this a different color so that you can see what we're doing here. Okay, so now I'm going to take January North, and I'm going to change it to 100, and see how North January changed to 100. So now I've converted the axes, but it's still live. You see what I'm done? Okay, that's what. And so this was wonderful. Wonderful use for this. One I did one time to use this is I had a list of, I basically had what's the top, and I had debt, loan-related transactions down the side. And then I realized I also needed a calendar basically to tell me when these things were going to happen. So what I did was I used the array transpose function. So what I ended up was the dates down the side and the categories across the top, the transactions, which was very useful for me. Okay. Oh boy. Array H lookup. Array lookups. So we haven't done lookups yet. Let's see where lookups are. It would be easier to do lookups first. Here's VLOOKUP and H lookup. Then we'll go back to the array. Okay, so the way a lookup works is it looks up an item in a table based on a value in a specific cell. So here's our table of data. I've got north, south, east, west, and I've got January, February, March. It looks like it's the same information, same data. So here's our table. The function requires, oops, where's my, here it is. The function has 3 arguments. Arguments are these pieces. They're the parts of a function that are separated by commas, typically within parentheses. That's called an argument. So this function has 3 arguments. The first one is, well, first you have the function name. That's out here. So we're doing a VLOOKUP function. Then I used the lookup value of VLOOKUP. So I'm saying, I'm referencing the value of north. Then you have the table, where is the data located, the table array. So in my case, I'm referencing this V table. Then you say, okay, what column in that table, when I find the reference, what column do you want me to bring the data back from? So in this case, what I've done is I'm looking up north to bring me back what's in the 3rd column. And here's the answer. Now, when you count the column numbers, you start with this first. So it's 1, 2, 3. That's why it's showing 509 instead of 320, because this column index of 3. So it might be easier if I now change the values. Let's say I want to look up south, and I want to bring back what's in column 2. And you see my answer has changed to 322 because it's found south and gone over to the 2nd column. So there's my 322. That's VLOOKUP. With the same data, you can also do an HLOOKUP function. So VLOOKUP looks across the row. HLOOKUP looks down the column. So here's my HLOOKUP function, and I'm saying, here's my lookup value, my reference. Here's my table of data. And here's my row index. This is saying find February and then give me the 5th item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 903. If I change this to March and change this to 2, it's finding March and giving me the 2nd item, which is 320. Okay, so that's VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. Now we can go look at the array functions on those. Okay, so here is the traditional H lookup. Look up what's in H7 in my table and bring back what's in the 7 column. Oh, and I've added a argument, which is an optional argument, false. False says only bring me back an answer if you actually find my lookup value in the list. If you don't find the exact thing, return an error. So if I typed here, let's see, JA instead of Jan, it's going to turn to an NA error because it doesn't have it doesn't have JA in this list. But if I take out this argument or turn it to true, but let's take it out, I'll get an answer because it says, well, the first one I find after JA is Jan. So I found something down the list that, that not that's close to it, but the next one alphabetically was Jan. So I'm using that. All right, so that's what that false does. False means, forces it to require that you do, and that can be useful also if you're trying to do a formula to specifically look for somebody. You don't want to bring back somebody else because all you're going to get is the number. It's not obvious. So I'm usually careful to add false. Okay, VLOOKUP we talked about before goes the other way. So these two are the normal ones. Now in an array lookup, what you're doing is you're summing what you bring back from that lookup. So you're bringing back a range and summing it. So inside the array function, you're seeing an HLOOKUP function, but what it's saying is look in the table, look in L7, which in this case I go to January, and then bring me back what's in columns 3, 4, and 5. Okay? Whereas before you could only give it one number, 3, 4, or 5. Here you're doing 3, 4, and 5. Okay? So that's what an array function HLOOKUP or VLOOKUP does. Why is this useful? Well, maybe I want this, now I'm going to make this February. Now I'm going to make this, I want to look in South instead. You very quickly get the answer that you're looking for. Okay, dynamic link text. This is kind of fun. I use this sometimes. It's not something you use all the time, but it's useful. You know where I'll use it sometimes is if I am writing a standard commentary to a set of financials and I want it to change each month. I don't want to have to retype the whole thing. You can create a formula, and I've done a text rendition of it here in this cell. By typing a formula the way you would normally do, equals plus an item, equals an item, an operand and another item, an operand and another item. For that operand, if you use an ampersand, that's this little squiggly guy. Here's an ampersand. It's over the no, it's not. It's over the 7 key. Yes, an ampersand. You can use an ampersand to join references to text labels. So in this case, I've got a text, the company, and then I've used an ampersand to add a formula based on the outcome of this cell. So in other words, if H6 is more than 0, give me the text snippet earned, otherwise give me lost. Then I'm going using another ampersand to add a text $sign. Then I've got another, I guess these are arguments, another argument that would be, it's actually a formula where it's giving me the value. And then I've added with an ampersand another text item million year. So what that's, here is the actual formula. And so if I make this now 800, see it's changed this and it's changed the sentence. Okay, and if I put this back to 100, earn for. All right, so I've built a sentence, a text that will automatically change using a combination of formulas and text items. And the way you join the arguments in that formula is with ampersands. Worksheet error codes. Worksheet error codes. These are actually, we just saw one before when I tried to do a false VLOOKUP with a false condition, and it returned NA. That's one. Anyway, these are the main the main worksheet error codes you get if you do something wrong in Excel. If you try to divide a number by 0, as I've done here, G4 over H4, this division by 0. The reason you're getting that is because I'm dividing 5 by 0, and there's no such, that's not a formula that can be evaluated, so it gives a division by 0. Missing data. Here, I've done a lookup. What am I doing here? Let's see. Looking up G6. Okay, so I'm looking up the item 3 in this table, and I'm looking in the second row. So this doesn't exist. You can't do it. So I'm getting an NA, a missing data. I'm looking for something that doesn't exist. The formula can't evaluate because it can't find it. Bad name is usually that means you've misspelled a where it says name here, you've misspelled a function. In this case, I typed in SU instead of SUM. Or you could have done a reference to a range name and mistyped the range name. So for some reason it can't. You haven't typed a name that it can recognize. Missing argument separator. You get a null. That's because I didn't put the comma in here. I failed to separate the arguments. So you get that null. Exceeding number size. You can actually create a number that Excel can't deal with. It's just too large. So what I've got here is 9 to the 28th, and it can't deal with it. Oh, and then I'm raising that to the 9 to the 20th. So I'm raising 9 to the 28th to 9 to the 28th. It just says, no, I can't deal with a number that big. Missing reference. You've got a formula with a cell that has gone AWOL. You've either deleted it, typically, or moved it off the sheet or done something. And then a text reference. Here, the text reference, this says equals value. I'm getting a value code because I've tried to do math on text. I've tried to do 5 plus rich, and that doesn't work. While I'm here, I'm going to show you a function called if error. What we used to do before if error, and if error I think came on probably either 2007 or 2010. Up here, I have my division by 0. What we used to do to get around that is to make this function fancy. You'd say if H4 equals 0, comma, give me 0. Otherwise, give me the formula I'm looking for. Okay, now that evaluates to 0 because H4 is 0. I've done an if function to eliminate the error. But there's an even cooler way to do it, and that's to use if error. So let me undo this. There's now a function called if error, and it's more efficient. What you do is you type in equals if error, start your arguments, type in the formula that you want, G4 over H4, and then separate it from the next argument, where the second argument is just what do I do if it's an error? And the answer is, in this case, we want a 0, so I'll do that, enter, and it works the same way, but it's a heck of a lot easier. That will work on any enter, so I could do this. Okay, so that's if error. Errors. Oh, this was just for me to demonstrate what I just demonstrated. Data validation. Again, we've already shown that one. Yeah, we've already shown this. This is using a list. Conditional formatting. This is kind of fun. There is a lot of automated formatting that you can apply to the results to Excel cells. So before I talked about, and perhaps this has happened to you. This is, let's see, Here, let's replace these. East, south, west. Oh, that's not going to, never mind. That's not going to just demonstrate what I want to demonstrate. Okay, so let's say we have a range. You could manually shade each row. And of course you would do that by grabbing the cell and picking a color from the fills. So maybe I got that one, and then maybe I got this one, this one. Then if I decide to insert a row of data, let's do it here. I now have I got a hassle. I've now got to deal with what's happened, and it doesn't adjust automatically. If you use conditional formatting instead, and I've already conditionally formatted this, here's the actual formula. There's rules. Here's the rule. I've used a formula to determine which cells to format. Format values where this formula is true, and here's the formula that I put in, and then give it a color. Now the formula uses the mod function. Basically what the mod says what's the remainder. So what it's doing is it's taking the row number that it's on and dividing it by 2. And if that gives a remainder of 1, which basically means that we're on an odd row, then go ahead, an odd numbered row, then go ahead and shade it. If we're on an even row, don't. All right. What's the power of that? Now, if I add more rows, it'll automatically adjust the table for it because it's looking at the current row number, not what you originally set up. So that's very, very helpful if you've got a table of data. If for some reason you wanted to highlight the even rows instead of the odd rows, change the formula, conditional formatting, manage rules, edit the rule, and I'll change it to equals 0 instead of equals 1. Put a different color. Now I'm going to apply it, and you'll see that the even rows will be highlighted instead. If put it back. Let's say I wanted to do the columns instead. Additional formatting, which you might want to do. Maybe you've got months or something like that. Manage rules. Change row to column. Fine. So I was talking before about how you don't have to actually memorize everything to do with these functions. You just have to know they exist. Then you just go, I never remember. It's not that complicated, but I never remember this function. So what I do is I go out to the internet. We bring over a tab. And in the Excel, I use Chrome, Excel, shade every other row. You see it's automatically already suggesting it. And you'll find 20 articles. And now Google actually puts the Microsoft support box up here. But even if you don't want to use Microsoft, I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you didn't want to use Microsoft, you can go here, anyone you want. And when you go there, I'm going to some commercial site, Excel Easy. You'll find the formula someplace on their, here it is, right here, enter the formula. You just copy it. One that I mentioned before, last name from full name. And here's the formula that you would use to extract, as they're showing here. You've got a list of full names and you just want a last name. So you just have to go Google this stuff so you don't have to memorize it. That's what I'm trying to say. Oops. Trying to undo what I did there. I've left that conditional formatting. That's okay. Okay, so that's one set. There's a lot of additional interesting things you can do here. You can do it based on percentages. You can do top and bottoms, top 10 items, for example. Data bars. You can color scales, icon sets. So in this case, I've added these icons, and here's some more, and here's some more, based on, let's see what the conditional formatting manager. Okay, so this icon set was uh, based on when the value is greater than 75, and so we've got one here, etc. So all of this is in there. You can do whatever you want with it. We use in the client I'm working with presently, we've done a monthly task list, a monthly checklist for their accounting department. And we wanted to highlight tasks that were past due that hadn't been completed yet. So we've done we've done a formula that checks to see if there's a completion date and whether that completion date is before or after the due date, and it returns the color by using an icon set. So it very quickly shows you by color, by icon, which one, which items are timely and which aren't. This is the example of applying a color scale. And the color scale that we've applied here is make the lowest value red, the middle value yellow, and the highest value green. If I change this to blue, see how it's changed the items. That's not a very attractive scheme. Let's see if I can undo that. Oh, that took me all the way back there. It's interesting, it doesn't seem to let you undo additional formatting using. Yeah, no, some reason. Huh. Yeah, for some reason, conditional formatting doesn't seem to be a step you can just undo by sequencing backwards. Anyway, so you get you get an example of what's going on here. These, I think, are colored based. Let me see. Condition manage rules. Yeah, I said isref. It's a function equals isref b2, then color it red. Circular reference. Circular reference is generally, almost always, a condition that you want to avoid. There are certain functions in which you actually do want to calculate something over and over automatically, maybe 5 times or 10 times, and Excel has the ability for you to set that up. But usually you don't want a circular reference. A circular reference is where two cells have formulas that depend on each other, and that's generally a problem. So here I've got 324. Here I've got C3 minus 3. So this formula says whatever is in this cell, take away 3. If I make this instead into a formula that relies on C8 equals C8, 8 over 2, I've set up a circular reference. And so you get an error message right away. If I accept that, it will draw this to tell you. It will tell you down here that you've got a circular reference. And if you happen to be somewhere else, there is a let's see, review formulas, error checking, circular references, and you get a list of your circular references. And basically what you need, it tells you these two cells are depending on each other. Unless you want that to remain, you need to fix one of them. Generally, if I open a worksheet and I see that, and I don't have any other intelligent way of doing it, what I'll do is I'll take the first one and turn it into values, copy, paste special. Here, I'll just use this values. And that, of course, removes the circular reference, but that may have a desired result. Sorry, I jumped. Now, go to special. This is one that very few people use. Most people don't know it's there. And it can be extremely, extremely useful. And so you have it in your toolbox, that you, so I'll show it to you. By the way, notice right away that I've got an error message here. The number stored as text. Should be a formula. I'm going to type another one in here. Joe. Okay. If I said to you, I would like you to color every cell that's blank, I want that colored. You might not, if you don't know Go To Special, it would take you probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes to do this, because you'd have to go either to one at a time or probably shift, control click until you selected them all, right? And then you would hit color. Instead, I'm going to highlight my range, find and select, go to special, get a dialog box, blanks. Okay. Now it's automatically selected all the blanks in your range, and you can color them. All kinds of applicability for this. Now, looking for blanks to color to highlight them may not be what's important. Let's go look for something else. Find and select, go to special, constants, me text. Okay, so what that needle, I mean, this one I could see anyway, but this is a needle in the haystack other than it's marked as such. Okay. Let's do find and select, go to special. Let's do this one. All right, so I'm going to grab these two columns and select, go to special, column differences. What it's done is it's selected every item that is different from its partner, from the other, in this case, the one from its left, etc. That can be very useful if you're trying to compare two lists and see if something's missing from one or needs to be added to the other. Okay, one more. Oh, careful. You have to be selected on the range that you want to evaluate. Select, special. Let's say I want a formula. Those are my only formulas. It would take you forever to find this otherwise, but those are my formulas. Anyway, know about that. Go to special, really useful. Okay, I was going to take a break. The problem is I don't know how to stop the recording and re-record it. So I think we'll just keep going. I'm not re-record it, but pause the recording and restart it. Lookups, lookup. Lookup is a little bit different than VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. They're not the same thing. This one, lookup, looks up a value in a second list based on the sequence of items in a first list. So I've typed Janet here, and the formula lookup has 3 arguments. What value am I looking up? What range should I look it up in? And where should I bring back my results from? Okay, so in this case, Janet is number 1, 2 is the 3rd item. So the formula is evaluating to green because it's giving me the 3rd item. If I type in Fred, who's the 1st item in this list, then it brings me back the 1st item in this list, which is orange. There's a caveat here. This list must be in ascending order. So if it's numbers, it's got to be numeric order. If it's alphabetical, it has to be in alphabetical order. if you type in, sorry, frog, F-R-O-G, it's giving me orange. So it's bringing back the first. Let's see what happens if we type in, so type in Jane, and it is bringing me red, which is in the second position. So it seems to be the entry. It's the one just before. It's kind of like where it would be inserted. So one thing you could do to make sure that doesn't happen is through conditional formatting. I'm sorry, data validation, list. Source is this list, and I want a drop down, and now the person has to pick one of your items. The data validation forces them, from not screwing up what you're trying to do. Okay, offset. Offset lets you use values in cells based on their relative position. So what I've done here is actually 4 scenarios. Formula is down here. In this first scenario, I've used offset. Now offset has, I believe, 5 arguments. Well, at least 3, but it can have 5. First one is the reference. What's my starting point? In this case, my reference is E8, which is the cell that's highlighted there, 34. Then I'm saying how many rows over should I look? How many columns over should I look? So it would be rows to the right and columns. I'm sorry, rows down and columns to if it's a positive number, rows up and columns to the left if they're negative numbers. And then the next 2 is if you're trying to define a range and not just a single cell, how many rows of height should I bring back and how many columns of height should I bring back? So in this first example, it basically says go to E8, go over, down 1 row, go over 1 column, and bring me back just, I'm sorry, these arguments here are references to this stack of inputs. And bring me back an item that's just 1 by 1. So that's basically saying go down, go over, and bring me back that single cell. In this next example, and I believe I'm starting with E8. Yeah, I've got a sum function outside of surrounding the offset because I want to sum the range that's the result of the offset reference. So in this case, I'm saying from my starting point, go down 1, go over 2, and then bring me back a 2 by 1. 2 high, 1 wide. So down 1, go over 2, and then bring me back a 2 by 1. And then, again, I've got those 2 inside of a sum. So 12 and 68 is my 80. In this example, I'm doing something similar, but I'm just showing the example of a negative number. So in this case, we're starting here, and we've got a negative row. So we have to go up 1. Then we got a column offset's positive, so we go over, and then bring me back a 1 by 2. So it's these 2. And again, I'm summing them, so sum of 34 and 7 is my 41. And of course, my changes. Okay, and then in the last one, what am I doing? Similar thing, I'm just using a negative here, over over 3, and bringing a 3 by 1. And again, I'm summing them. So let's see, starting here, negative 2, so that's up 2 rows, and then over 3, 1, 2, 3, and then bring me back a range that's stacked 3 by 1. So these 3, and I've got them in a sum command. My sum down here, it says 60. My sum is 60. That's that. Scroll over. Real time, it is, I say real time, we've actually only got one participant today who's been very patient and quiet, and quiet as I go through this. I'm recording it because we had some confusion in scheduling it, and I suspect that many of the people who intended to attend did not know that the session had been rescheduled. So we will have this here, and I'll send out another announcement telling people that telling everyone that it's been rescheduled. Anyway, so real time, it's 1:42. We started about 12:42, so it's about an hour. So we're doing okay. This is probably gonna, let's see how many we have left. Not that much. Actually, some of these are repeats I can see. Okay, so that was offset. Next function is match. What match does is, well, let's look. Here's our data set. They're ordered 1 through 6. I believe these also need to be in order. Okay. Then here's our lookup item, bolts, and here's the actual match formula itself. So we're saying, oh, now here I've got a match type of 0, which means only bring it back if we've got an exact match. If it's a match type of 1, it's bring back it if it's less than or equal to the answer that we expected. So the first argument says etrov, look up bolts in the lookup array range, and you see that drawn here, and then 0 is the match type. And again, we've got it set for exact match. So what it's doing is it's bringing back where this item is in the sequence. So if I change this to cogs instead of bolts, you've seen that it is not sensitive to capitalization. Okay, so cogs is the third item, so the match formula is bringing up the third item. If I change this to cons, I'm going to get an error because our match type here is 0. If I change that, well, in the next, we'll show what happens if you go to it. Okay, so in this scenario, where my formula has a what do they call it, match type of 0, it'll only work if they give you something that's in the list. We just described how you could force that to happen. You would do that with data validation. We would change this to list. We'd say that our list is here. And yes, I want to drop down, click OK. Now they got to pick one of it. If they try to type something else, they're going to get an error. I would change my error message to say, please use the drop down or something like that. Okay. Over here, we've got a match of 1, which means less than or equal to. So it will find the item in the list. So, okay, so here I've got grapes. So it's bringing back a 4 because it found that. If I try typing grains, it's going to bring a 3 because it's less than or equal to. So it's bringing back that. Pivot table. Pivot tables are extremely useful for manipulating data. We talked a little earlier about how Microsoft has continued to develop and enhance the Excel product to be stronger and stronger at data manipulation, not just simple reporting and simple calculations. So we have a data table. In the table, we have fields. And I'll go ahead and these are the field names. So let's just go ahead and make those bold. In the earlier versions, it was very, very specific. There were very specific rules that for these. For example, you couldn't have a space. So if you had continent name, it wouldn't work. Now that's not the case. It's got a lot more sophisticated. But anyway, so we've got a table of data. We want to manipulate that data. The way you manipulate it quickly is with a pivot table. All right, so I haven't drawn it yet. Good, so I'm going to do that. All right, so pivot table. So I'm going to select my corner, insert pivot table, and it pops up the create pivot table box. First, it wants to know where's the data. So I'm going to click here. That lets me go draw the data table. So my data is over here. So I'm going to draw that, including the field names, and then press enter. Now I've drawn that. You can also use an external data source. And this can be very powerful. If you have a database that you have valid access to, you could go get that instead of something in your data. Okay, next, where do you want it to be placed? In this case, I want it where I was. I could just say put it in a new worksheet, but I'll put it where it was. And then this is kind of complicated, but down here, let's say you already have a pivot table. This function lets you join pivot table, join data sets to add data so that for more complicated models. Okay, so now I'm going to say okay. Now it takes me back where I was. This is when I started to build the pivot table. All right, so now I've got the starting point to draw a pivot table. Excel knows where my data is and knows where I want my pivot table to be. It's also drawn this pivot table fields window over here, showing me my fields, which it grabbed from the first, from the field name. It presumes that the first row of your data are the field names, which it is in this case. And then it's given me 4 quadrants. I guess that's redundant. It's given me quadrants where I can drag these field names. As you start to drag them, you create your pivot table report. So let's say I want to first organize my rows by continent. I drag it down here. All right, now I see my continents, Asia, Europe, North America. Maybe I also want the ability to show the countries within those. Okay, all of that's good, but I don't have any data yet. All right, so what I want to look at is April, May, and June, second quarter. Drag in April. Sorry, I'm going to have those be columns. April. That's okay. I was right the first one. May. Okay, so now I've got the data for those columns. By default, it applies various things like subtotals. So you see it's done that. A lot of things have already happened. So let me kind of go through that. First of all, it's done these in the order that I suggested. You could flip the order. It's a little odd, but you know, perhaps your data isn't in the right, you know, maybe your continents are in the second column, so you can flip those. You could also manually adjust them by grabbing the row if you wanted to. You can have it move it. Oh, it's because I've got these over here. It doesn't want to let me do that. Let me get these out of the way. Okay. Anyway, so that's the first step. Maybe you have salespeople in here also. Maybe there's other stuff. Maybe you just want the data by continent. Take this off. Now you just got it by continent. Country back. These are collapsible. And re-expandable. It's done a grand total. We could just filter it to just give me North America. I like the way we filter our tables. You can apply value filters, you know, all kinds of things, and you can sort it in opposite order. So let's see that. See why am I really seeing? That's the only one's left. Okay, so now I'm in reverse order. Let me put it back to regular order. So you can do all that. Now let's talk about the values. Within the values, I think it was in 2016, Excel fixed something that was very annoying for everyone. By default, it was always doing the count, and most people do this month of sum. So they finally fixed it. So the default is now sum. It used to be count, and the first thing you had to do was go in and change it. In value field settings, and in value field settings, you can customize the name. So maybe I want to say one, oops. And maybe I want the average instead. Whoops, of course, you want to change this first because it changed the name again, but that's okay. Average. And you can also change the format. So maybe I want to make currency. Okay, so now it's changed it. It's doing the average instead of the the sum. So this is an average now instead of a sum. You see that? And this is average. If I want to put it back, change it again. Value field settings, put it back to sum. By the way, note this changed. Maybe I don't want dollars. Maybe I want counting dollars. Okay, now it's done it that way. You can also edit them directly up here. Oop, my cursor skipped. This. That happens a lot of times, and I can't tell you why that happens. I think it's because I've chosen a label in the cell that is the same as a field name. When that happens, all I do is I just add a space, which doesn't affect anything, and it shows up there like that. And then you can do that. I'm not sure. I think it's because I've changed to something that says, hey, I got one of those. And I think that's why it's doing that. So if you just add a space, you're fine. Okay. If you wanted to put it back for some reason, value fields, just back like that. Okay, so that's the filters. Now, there's something, let's see. Table list field windows, those were these. I'm just checking to make sure I've covered everything. Let's say you wanted to, we only want the continents, but we don't want the country of China. Actually, that is, we do want China. Sorry. Okay, yeah, the way I did it. Select multiple items. And so if we didn't want China, we would do it that way. And now it's hopefully done. Do you have another item besides China in Asia? Yeah, we had India. So it's showing us the information for India. I hope. Let's go back. 700. India. Both. That's interesting. Sure, I'd have to play with it, see why it's doing that. I would expect that it would have only showed us the 500. Wait, did I refresh? Yeah. Huh. Sure why we're getting that outcome. I'll have to do some research to figure out why that's happening. For now, I'm going to take this, drag it back down here. Asia. Possibly, yeah, I'm not sure. Possibly it would only, maybe it, let me try something. Country. No, you can't be in both places at once. All right. Next, I want to show you a sort of a limitation or an issue with pivot tables. I get this pivot table, and okay, so now I've got the data I want. But what I want to do next is I want the quarter. I want the total. Now I don't have. Going back to wonderful, my dry cleaning is ready. I don't have. I don't know if that. Yeah, it does show me. I don't have the quarter in here. That's not in my data table. So we have to build it. Well, one thing you could do is you could say, I'll come out here, equals, um, I could do it a couple ways, but I'll just do it by pointing equals this plus this plus this, enter, and I got 1500. But look at the formula that it drew. Because I'm referencing cells in a pivot table, by default, it's actually not giving us the cell reference, it's giving us the math to get to that number. If I then try and drag this down or copy paste it, I'm going to get the same answer because in each one of these cells, it's giving me a pivot table formula, not the references I want. Two ways you can deal with this. One way is to type in what you wanted. So I would do equals C5 plus D5 plus E5. Okay, now I've got 1500, but now you see I've got a relative reference. So when I copy this down, it works. And so now I'm getting my this is what, Q2. Okay, that's good, except for one problem. If I muck around with the table here, and let's say I decide that, let's see, how should we do this? That I don't want the country in there. All right, these are working, but now whoops, these three are working, but these are in the way, and I don't have this one, which I wanted. Can I draw it up? Yeah, but I don't have it to start with. Okay, so, number one. Number two, I don't have the formatting I'd like. Can I grab the formatting? Yes, Control C, format painter, and I get, formatting something like it. But it's not ideal. And again, if I once again kind of change the nature of it, I don't have the formatting here. There's a lot of problems with it. There is a way to address this, and the way to address it is by making your own field. Here, with the fields we have are the months. We're going to create a calculated field. The way you do that is you go, whenever you're in a pivot table, you're going to get pivot table tools up here in the menu. It gives you two more ribbons, Analyze and Design. Design is basically for formatting. You can do all kinds of things. Maybe we want to change the color, all kinds of stuff. Analyze is where we need to go for this. Analyze, by the way, one important thing is change data source. Maybe I want to use different data. You would click here, change data source, and it gives you the ability to change your data range. Let's go back. Analyze, fields, items, and sets, calculated field. Okay, now you get the ability to generate your own fields to add to this list. So I'm going to type in, let's see, how do we have this? Q1 2015 is what I'll call it. Then you start here. You're going to get rid of the 0. We don't want that. I'm going to take, all right, I'll do Q1. 1. No, you know what, that's going to take extra time. Let's change this to Q2. 2. All right, so I want to add this. Insert field, just add it up here. I'm going to type a plus sign. A, insert that with a plus sign. June, insert that. Okay. Okay, now I've created a new field called Q2. By default, Excel automatically added it to the pivot table as soon as I want it. What's sweet about this is now I have exactly what I want. If I want to get rid of countries, everything that you see here, it's added to the pivot table and it's doing exactly what I want. It flows with the pivot table, whatever I decide to do. If I want, if I want to move Europe to the top, it moves it with it. Everything, so that's how you do it. It's up here, field set items, calculated field. I'll caution you that this formula bar does not accept all of the formulas and functions that you can use in the Excel, over here in the Excel formula bar. It's kind of primitive. It'll do basic stuff, add, subtract, multiply. But if you try and put in VLOOKUP, it's not going to work. And this list of fields is the ones that it's interesting that it inserted quarter one. That wasn't a natural field. I don't know. Let me see where that came from. We certainly didn't have a field called quarter one. Let's see what quarter one is. Huh. Yeah, that's that. Okay, that was calculated fields. I just showed you it. Slicers, we looked at before. You create a table, you insert slicers. Here's our field. So let's do it real fast. Control T makes a table, or insert table. Control T. Now I got a table. My table has headers. Okay, I got a table. I want it to be this color. Okay, now I'm going to insert slicers. Insert slicer. And let's grab them all. Now I got my slicers, and I can take out the deceased, or just the deceased. I can just look at deceased females, et cetera, et cetera. Data group. Data group is very useful for display purposes. You build a detailed table, so we've got one here, but you decide that you want to be able to toggle quickly at different levels. So in this case, I've got both continents and countries. I want to be able to show just continents, or expand it down. So what I do is I grab this, the first block of countries, and actually I think I can do this all simultaneously by holding the control. So I'm holding the control key while I select these, and then I'm going to go to data and group. The time I was wrong. Data group. Okay, what it did was it moved it over here, and it's drawn a little outline kind of scenario here with an expansion bar. Let me finish adding them. Another group and another group. Because all three of these groups are at the same level, I now have a level 1 and a level 2. Right now I'm looking at level 2, which is everything. When I click on this little button and go to level 1, it will collapse the data to just show me level 1. Get back, I can hit 2 and see everything. Or I could just expand by clicking on the arrows, the ones that I want to expand. Let's insert, hold on. I'm going to quickly manufacture some data. Type the space just to move them over a little bit. And let me just borrow these numbers, it doesn't matter. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 3 rows, hit group again, and now I've got a third level. So if I want to just see countries, I would go to level 2. Countries, if I want to also see sub-countries, I could go to level 3, or I could just manually close them. Maybe I decide that I'll never use this level. You hit ungroup, and it backs out. Now it thinks those are countries. You know, I mean, they're at the same group level. Let me put it back in. Okay, that's rows. You can do the same thing for columns. So let's say I just want to see columns, quarters. I could do this group, and now I've got the ability to collapse it down to quarters. So that's grouping. Can be either way. Mean, median, mode. Mean, median, mode. There are 3 measures of central tendency in statistics, and they're all there are functions for all of them in Excel. So here's my data. And it's a little busy. Kind of ignore it until I show it to you. So here's my data set. My first function is a very simple mean function, but we actually don't use mean. We use average. Mean is it's the type of measure of, it's the type of average that the common people think of as average, but there are actually other types of central tendency. So mean is the formula for mean is average. And all this is doing is taking that list, it's adding it up. So I've got 258 in that, I'm looking down here, 258 in that my list. It's dividing it by a count of 10 to get a mean of 25.8. Then there is mode. Mode is another measure of central tendency, but it's a different measure. Now, there's mode single and mode multi. Mode means what number appears in the data most often. Okay, so in our list here, the single number that appears most often, again, it's using the same list, but the one that appears most often is 20. I've got it twice. So that's why we're seeing a 20 here. Where, when would you use a mode? Well, maybe you are trying to figure out what's the average age of your, you're looking at a population of employee age, and you don't want to know average. You want to know, who are the most, what age are most of them, or what age do we have the most? Well, 20-year-olds. We have two 20-year-olds. Okay. Mode multi is an array function. Let's see why this is giving me an error. Mode multi 539. Okay. So what mode multi is doing? See, it's an array function. It's been entered here into this block, and you can tell it's an array because it has the brackets outside it. And what it says is, this is the one that appears most often. This is the one that appears next most often. And this is the one that appears next most often, except there aren't any other repeats. So I think if I change this number, let's change this number to 30. Yeah, they switched. This is now most often. It's interesting though. I thought this would be 20 and it didn't, and I don't know the answer why. Some research. Okay. And then the last measure of central tendency is median. What median does is it looks in the middle and brings back the item that's in the middle of your list. If you have an odd number of entries in your list, that's easy because you have actually have a middle item. If you have an even number, in this case we have 10, what it does is it does the average of the two that are in the middle. That's why this is saying 23.5, even though there is no 23.5 here. If I change this number to 13, then the answer changes to 23 because now it's doing this lane and it sees this one in the middle. Okay, those are measures of central tendency. Analysis pack. Analysis pack, this is something I just want you to be aware that it's there. If you need to use it, you will need to do some research. But I just want you to know that it's aware, be aware that it's there. You have to, it comes in there, but you kind of have to activate it. And you go to File, Options, Add-ins, and then you'll find it here. And since I've already got it, it says okay, but I think if you don't have it, it'll give you the opportunity to add it. Or maybe you do it down here, go. Yeah, and then you click them here to add them. So mine are already added. So these are some that come with it. What these are very specialized programs. They're actually programs that are built into Excel. They're kind of like macros, but they run specific routines and do specific things. They don't. They're one time because it's a program. So if you change underlying data, you'll have to run it again. It won't. I don't think it updates automatically. You can do there's all kinds of stuff in here. I became, for the one time in my life that I have ever used this, was actually assisting my wife as she was going through her human resource master's program. They had them use the analysis pack to demonstrate, I believe it was called the Z test. And the Z test is a measure of whether an item that appears in a population is reasonably part of that population or not. Why would an HR person need to know that? Well, because someone comes in and alleges discrimination because their salary is outside of everybody else's salary. Well, the first thing HR has to do is a Z test to see if that person's salary is reasonable for the population. If you go into court and show a positive Z test, then that on its own, absent other information, then you're successful in defending that the salary is reasonable for the population. Z test is in here. There's a whole bunch of them, but you got to go looking for them. What I recommend in this case is do research. Also go on to YouTube. You'll find lots of videos how to use this. That's what we actually did, and because I wasn't familiar with that Z test. Okay, we got a few more, and then we'll end our session. We're coming up on almost 2 hours. We'll 2.5 hours. I think that was our original. All right, so sum ifs. Sum ifs, there's two formulas, sum if and sum ifs. A sum if sums a range based on a criteria. Sum ifs sums a range based on multiple criteria. That's basically the difference. So you use sum if you have one criteria, you have sum ifs if you have two or more. If you have one, you could use a sum ifs and just put it in one, but why would you? The only thing is that they have a slightly different, the arguments are different order. So let's look at that. So here's our data. Okay, and so I've got divisions, I got types, and I got line items. Okay, so here's our data. And what I'm wanting to be able to do is I want to know what the how we're doing in the TSD division. All right, so clearly here I've got them broken out, so we could just sum the range. But what if they weren't? What if they were scattered? What if they were mixed in? What if this wasn't sorted? Sum if, first argument says, what range do I want to look at for this analysis? And the answer is A through O. And that's the range I'm looking at. The next is, where is my criteria? What am I trying to sum for? And we've got C19, which is TSD. And then the last is, and what range of my, what part of my inspection range do I want to sum? And in this case, we want the column we're in, so it's going to be D2 to O15. That's that. All right, now, oops. Okay. So if I change this to MSD, now I get for MSD. SDS, or the SDSs. Now, let's say I wanted to do receipts and disbursements. Whoops, helps if you spell receipts right. That's not the only problem. So there's my inspection range. Look for receipts. For curiosity, let me be sure that I want to prove that. Receipts, receipts, receipts. There's 280, and I think I know why that is. Let me try something else. 84. Yeah, that's why. The reason it's doing that is it's offsetting. It's offsetting because this receipts isn't in this row, this column, I'm sorry. It's in this column. kind of complicated. So, but basically, make sure you draw carefully. If you want to pull something from types, then you're better off having this sum the range from B to. Now I get the 291. The problem was that the receipts that I'm looking for is in the second column, so that's why it was giving me the answer from the second. So be careful. If you're wanting to use a sum if on the starts that we're going to look for in this range, it'd probably be better to change this from an A to a B. Okay. Let's say you want to sort on multiple criteria, not just division. I want to do it on division and type. Or maybe in this case, I set it up for 3 actually. I want to do divisions, sorted by divisions, types, and line items. You can use an asterisk as a wild card. If I change this to MSD, it's only going to give me MSD tier 1 customers, whether they're receipts or disbursements. If okay, maybe I want all MSD receipts. Change that to an asterisk. So now I've got 3. The formula is a little more complicated than the sum if formula. By the way, the difference is this says sum if, this says sum ifs. So the function name is sum ifs with an S. And the structure is a little different. I don't know if you remember, but when we were back here, the sum range itself is at the end. In the sum ifs, the sum range argument is at the beginning. And then comes criteria range 1. Where should I look for this criteria? And I'm sorry, where will the criteria be? Where should I look for the criteria range? And where's my actual criteria? So the actual criteria is here. It's what you've punched in. And then that repeats. So I'm doing it once for column A, once for column B, once for column C. And I can keep repeating that as many things as I want to sort on, as many as I want. Okay. You'll also find that besides sum, there's the same function exists for count. Let's see what I've done. Oh, that's interesting. In the case of countifs, it looks like you don't use the sum range. Yeah, it's not like in this out here. Well, you'd have to rebuild this. Because basically I'll take out this. I think that's what's missing. I'll skip it because this is not important. Yeah, now it did it. Because it doesn't need the sum range. I was saying I've got 2 MSD receipts, which is true. Okay, so that's countifs. And you could do countif, same thing. The difference between them is how many criteria you want to filter by. Okay. Eval formula. What is this? I was trying to show something, but I'm not. Oh, this is to evaluate a formula. Okay. So one way you can test a formula, if it's not saying you're getting an answer that you don't understand, you can test it in pieces. So I've got this formula, and I don't understand why I'm getting what I'm getting. So what I would do in this case is select the first part argument of the formula and hit the F9 key. What that does is solves that part of the formula. Then maybe here I'm going to select this, hit F9, solve that part of the formula. Solve that part of the formula. Solve that part of the formula. If I back out of this, I think it won't destroy the formula. Yeah, I hit the escape key. Okay, so that's how you can evaluate a formula. Comments. Remember before when we had the errors? Let's go back. When you have an error code, it shows up as a green triangle in the top left corner of the cell. If you see a red triangle in the top right corner of the cell, it means there's a comment. See here, these comments? If you hover over them, it will show you comment. To add a comment, right click, insert comment, and type to your heart's content. By default, it will first show the name of the user in bold. You can delete that if you want. You can format these. Maybe I only want this part to be not to be bold. I think you can even, maybe no, I thought you could change the color, but I don't see the ability to do that. I may be wrong. No, I guess not. Okay. Now, maybe instead of, maybe I want that to appear all the time. Well, then I would right click and show hide comments. Now it appears all the time. I can drag it over here. I can make it different sizes. I can, for that matter, format the comment. And interesting that, yeah, here we've got color, but I thought you could color just pieces of it. Oh, you know what? You can. You have to select it first. That comment. There's actually some real cool stuff you can do in here. What we do in my business is when we add comments to a client's work, format comment, some lines, color, effects, select picture. Take a little while, sorry. Just straight here. And okay, and then I'm going to make the transparency like 70%. Let's change this to blue so that our clients know which comments we've added. Some cool stuff you can do with it. So that's comments. If you want to make them all show, I don't think there's any other way than to select them and do hide comments. Yeah, no, it still only does it one at a time. Okay, you can move these. That's comments. Hyperlinks. Hyperlinks, you can insert a hyperlink into Excel, and when you do that, you create a link that can be clicked. You'll see that the cursor turns to a pointer when you are hand, when you click on it, and then the way you actually click it is to hold down the control key. Oh no, I beg your pardon. Looks like you don't. Oh, on another screen, that's just opened an email. So I'm going to read that. This is a website. And yeah, it's opening that over here. Anyway, it'll take a moment to open. Okay, so those are hyperlinks. To edit those, you can, I believe you can right click it. Yeah. And then edit hyperlink. And then you get a box. where you can change what text to display, what to put here, and in this case it's the email address. But if I do the other one, the site, see web page, email address, depending on what you want to do. Create new document, place a doc in this document. There's all kinds of things you can do. Text links. These are those formulas I was talking about before that let you extract a left and right name from a list. So let's say this is the list I've got: Joe Smith, Ralph Jones, Mildred or Hannah. I can split the formulas. These formulas find the first name. These formulas find the second name. And then I can use, there's another way to do this. You can use concatenation. But the way I've done it works also. To reassemble them in alphabetical order by last name. That can be very useful. I was describing is you can replace this with concatenate. And then you don't have to use the ampersands, you just use commas. You close it. It's the same thing. Concatenate, these two are the same, have the same result. Okay. So that can be very useful. I don't remember these formulas. I go look them up online. I'll tell you what they do. In the first case, what it does is it finds what character the space is in, and then it takes everything left to the left of the space. In this case, the formula again finds the space, and then it takes everything to the right of the space. That's basically what's going on. Character function. You can actually use this formula, CHAR, to return a character if you need it to, instead of typing the character. This happens to be a list, but you can find these online. Hell, you can generate it yourself. Just create the function and copy it down. Character, I've only used this function once. One time I had to create what's called an API, which is a command that you stick into the command the URL line on a browser to send a command to a website. And I needed that command to generate based on a data set. The API, or the instruction language that the website used, required that you use ampersands as part of the command. The problem is every time you try to use an ampersand in Excel, it thinks you're trying to join text. So what I had to do was what's happened, did I? Where is it? There's someplace here. There is a ampersand. I think it was 38. 37, close. No, 38, there it is. So that's how I got it to, so I needed it to, I needed my outcome to look like this: equals Joe and Jim. This is what I needed it to say, but Excel doesn't deal with that. So what I had to do was to do this. And then here I had to do and CAR 38. Now I have what I needed to send up. So you can use character to return a character that, a special character. That's kind of a complicated explanation, but that's the only time I've used it. Choose. Choose is useful. The choose function gives you an outcome based on a list. So here I have choose based on B7, which is what I put here, excuse me, the items in this list. All right, so if I change this to 3, brings me back Tuesday. Just for curiosity, let me see what happens if I try and do this as a range. Nope, won't work. Won't work. You have to give it the actual individual references. The other thing that's odd is I've got a comma here and it doesn't seem to mind that. Huh. Oh, I guess because by putting a comma in there, it thinks that the next argument is nothing, null. Okay, so that's choose. And then IRR, internal rate of return. This is a function that will generate the internal rate of return. Optionally, you can add a guess. You don't have to. The default guess is 10%. Let's see what this is. CPN solutions. What the heck is this? I don't remember. This was some article I wanted to show. So okay, and then, here's a link to there's a great article that has the 6 new functions that came out. Let me open that. Another screen. Hold on. This article came out. It's a little while ago. It's in strategic finance, and it actually does a nice job of describing the new. Oh, concatenate is a new function. That's it. Okay, so you won't find that before 2016. Concatenate. The nested ifs that we talked about. Instead of having to do this, just do this. A lot easier. Um, max or min. I didn't. Okay, so we did sum ifs. There's count ifs. Oh, there's average ifs. Oh, these all came in 2010. Now there's max ifs and min ifs also. And then they have funnel charts. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the session. I wanted to go through these. It's a little out of sequence. You will encounter most of this in your reading a little further down in the class when you get to the functions, but then you'll just be able to kind of skim those or use them as review. Oh yeah, that was just okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and I thank you very much.
You are currently the only person in this conference.